not necessarily have one of us answer the people who are actually using that on their day-to-day. So any questions that you have, raise your hand, ask them, and we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
How should I handle on my development laptop getting 2.5 and 3.0 to coexist for the next couple months? Can I?
One. Who wants to take that? Oh, well. Yeah. I actually don't want to talk too much right now. I would rather have those people answer. But it's entirely possible to run both 2.5 and 3.0 at the same time on the same machine. The only thing that you need to do is make sure that they have different ports and that they have different data directory. That's about it. So you can absolutely do that. Yeah, so you can, if you want to run both of them, run the installer for 2.5, run the installer for 3.0, give them different name, that should work.
Or or run in console mode, and then when you do that, it just grabs whatever port, like port 80, 81, 82, and or run it as Windows service and just install it with a different service name.
More questions?
Feel awkward holding one end.
We're collaborating.
So actually, I asked already regarding this probably a couple hours ago regarding the replication between the 2.5 to 3.0 is doable, right? So I'm going to test that probably in this week to see how about the 12-minute record, document, how it can be replicated. And by the way, I just saw the new build for the 2.5 come out today. Okay. So I checked the list, more than 6 fixes, 60 fixes. My question here is, regarding the QC process for the RavenDB, can you describe that to us, how this can be controlled?
You're talking about the QA feature, the QA process?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if you noticed, but very recently I've been dealing a lot with test performance and tests and tests and tests. We currently have 2 guys, right? 2 guys on QA. They're basically trying to break RavenDB as part of the daily job. We got some nice bugs and then bug fixes from them about that. And the process for release is usually all test passing, all stress test passing, go to our own production servers and run for a few days or weeks. And that gives us a lot of confidence in everything is working. That's additional to the QA processes and internal checking that we're doing. And now I want questions that those guys are going to answer. So let's see.
I was just curious if you guys had any tips or tricks, and I know I talked to some of the Raven HQ people earlier, but it was really good info for managing large installations, getting performance, and keeping track of your servers. Just what are some of the tips or the tools and tricks that you guys use to manage large instances?
No, that's my talk for tomorrow.
So Dan can answer that.
Yeah. You mind if we just wait till tomorrow to answer that question? All right, good.
More questions? Somewhere around here, for example? Yeah, over there, of course.
So I have a question about the Raven Studio. Now, are you using Web API for that at all, or is that all just
Yeah, so a lot of the work that was done in 3.0 was to do the Owen hosting, which, if I'm not mistaken, is actually using Web API. So we're actually consuming the Web APIs from the studio. So yeah, we are.
Would that be something that you would consider extending? So if someone wanted to write a Win8 Metro app or an iPad app or something like that to connect straight to the Web API?
Yeah.
You can do it right now. There is nothing else that you need to do.
I mean, there's a whole HTTP API underneath. This Management Studio is using those exposed web APIs, or the exposed APIs. And it's all HTTP, so if you can have an HTTP client, you can use whatever.
If I can add something. So one thing I would add to that is just going straight to HTTP. Thanks. Like Oren said, it's definitely possible to do now. You could just consume the web APIs directly. What I would like to see, and maybe this is something from the Raven community, from some developers, is get a nice, almost like a client API, just like we've had for .NET, but for, I don't know, even just for JavaScript or something outside of the .NET space, so that you can kind of cleanly consume these web APIs without having to rely on, say, the Silverlight lightweight client or even a .NET client. But in your case, doing a Windows store app or whatever they're called these days, Metro, whatever. Yeah, you could certainly do it just even from the C# side. You're just calling these HTTP endpoints, so that would work.
In a lot of our internal processes at Raven HQ, we actually use just the HTTP client out of .NET, which I guess is portable class library now.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah, so you can just use that wherever. I think the one caveat is just OAuth. If you're doing OAuth, you have to just follow OAuth 2 guidelines for getting a bearer token and that type of stuff. So.
On the service side, if I'm running Raven as a service, a Windows service, has there been any thought to maybe having an actual event log with your kind of system for notifications from Raven in that scenario?
So the question is, what about event logs for what about having an event log-like system for Raven? So assuming that you're talking about the event view, we have two things that are similar to that already. One of them is the debug log that we have that's accessible in the studio, and it's also create a capped file on disk. In addition to that, we have something called alerts. Again, that's accessible in the studio, both in 3.0 and in 2.5. We're going to utilize that a lot more, in the sense that we want to be able to, there are a lot of alerts that we could give but don't. Right now, if I remember correctly, we give alerts on invalid SQL replication config, on invalid, on failing to do incremental backup, those sorts of things. Okay. No, I'm sorry, come to me later, I will answer that. I want those people to talk. And those are the sort of questions that I'm going to have to answer. More questions? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so the question is, what happened with terms on how can I see terms on very large indexes? Yeah, if I remember correctly, you're talking about the show index entries feature, and that's limited on 250,000 entries on the index because we have to rebuild the index from scratch to do so. That's a backend feature to protect RavenDB from too much memory. Anyway, guys, since all of the questions seem to appear things that you don't see, so I'm going to ask some questions, and hopefully they're good ones. Oh, wait, you have the questions?
Oh yeah, sure. So the question is, since many of us here have been consultants at different companies, are there some success stories with Raven? I can speak for one. I had been out at 3M for almost 4 years, and we had a big, as I said in the talk, we had this big kind of enterprise project. It was a really ambitious project, and initially they were looking at using a combination of a SQL database with just this super powered machine they called the Beast. I don't know, many thousands of dollars, and then also running what is that called? Couchbase, is it? Yeah, Couchbase to do some caching of some of the data, and they had kind of tried that out, and it wasn't working great for them. And so I was there, and I suggested doing some Raven, and we looked into it, and the team there really liked it, adopted it, and has been using it since. So that project I was on, it ended in November, so I'm not sure what the status is now, but when I was there, the team was happy with it. They were really liking it, and it worked well for us.
Are you wanting advantages or specific names of?
No, not necessarily names, but just to get a sense. I haven't heard that much about Raven success stories, things that are out there, people touting that they've had good successes, building large databases.
So.
Well, you want to go down the line?
Sure, yeah, let's go down the line. So I've dealt with tons of projects using Raven HQ for different companies. One specifically that I think is a pretty huge success story is it's a shipment tracking company called OnAsset. They're awesome guys, and they were having lots of issues doing multi-tenancy with SQL Server, and we kind of moved them to RavenDB, and they got some added benefits of the schemaless nature of Raven really helped them build views that were different structures and really reduced the development time in that. And just not having to deal with schemas was massive for them. But it also kind of helped as they started blowing up and looking at how they were going to do that part of scale. It was pretty interesting having really short conversations with them and them saying, oh, this is really easy. Talking about sharding, talking about replication, that type of stuff. So I would say that's a pretty big success story.
I got one more thing, if you don't mind. Just along those same lines, I was telling you about that project at 3M. You guys probably have all used it without realizing it. So the project at 3M was we would basically sell TV screens and software that would measure point of sale data. And 3 of our clients, we had Dairy Queen, Wendy's, and Burger King. And basically, so if you go to one of these fast food restaurants and the drive-through or the menu boards in store, they're a TV screen. That was actually our stuff powering that. And what we were doing was some actually sophisticated stuff. As point of sale data came in, we would measure what was on screen at that time and the effect it had on consumer purchase behavior. So if you've ever been into like a Wendy's and you see that the menu board is actually a TV screen or a Dairy Queen or whatever, that was actually 3M stuff powering that. And we actually had a lot of data because point of sale data coming through is quite a bit, and so we were doing some analysis on that. And so anyway, I think it's kind of just a cool thing. You've maybe used that system without realizing it was Raven behind the scenes. So.
I'll just kind of quickly add, for Raven HQ, I mean, we've got lots of feedback from a lot of different customers that have just been very happy with the simplicity. You know, I think, I am assuming probably everybody here has at least done the basic Hello World kind of client. And so we all know that, but beyond that, we've seen this in projects that we've worked on. It's not just simple for Hello World. It's simple once you get going and seeing a project through as consultants from start all the way to finish. Pretty much every time it starts simple and remains simple, and you can start going advanced when you need it, and it's there. And there, you know, there's meaningful defaults. And again, I'm assuming most people probably know all of these things, but I just thought I'd kind of highlight that. And then for Raven HQ, I mean, we are built on top of RavenDB for all of our internal stuff. And you know, we've had no issues. We've been able to get people up and running with replication, getting their data highly available, that type of thing, and people have been happy. So, you know, not to mention any specific names, but those are a bunch of general comments.
So my talk tomorrow is about a lot of this, just the, you know, my list of things where I've been banging my head against SQL Server and should have been using RavenDB is probably a lot longer than my list of RavenDB stuff, just because of the number of years I've been doing both. But one of our clients right now builds CMSs, and so there's a lot of integration with other data providers and weird shaped data and stuff that's just different. And in a new redesign, they're using Angular, both on the front end and the back end, and Raven really lends itself to, well, in the management system, you can just pull down a whole Raven document into Angular, and you can make whatever changes you need to it, and then you can just save it back to the server in one fell swoop. Or things like, in the SQL Server days, you'd have like 30 tables that meant a piece of content. And some of them change, and so you have to publish all these 30 tables to something else. And then when it publishes, you have to enqueue something in the service bus so that it goes into the search thing, which then goes into Solar, and you have to send stuff to Solar in order to get to search. And then Solar's replicated to all these slaves, where in Raven, you just get all that stuff for free. So, yeah, I guess that's it.
Good answer. I'm Matt. My talk's tomorrow, so hopefully you stay for that. I just want to mention, like, one of the main reasons that I got involved with RavenDB is because of the OEM licensing. So if you're at all involved with creating software that you're going to sell to others and you need a database to be shipped with your software, it's a lot easier to just say, install my software, and your customer doesn't necessarily need to know that it's RavenDB. Raven has an OEM license that you can purchase from hibernating rhinos, and then you get royalty-free distribution of Raven as long as it's sold with your product for your product. That makes things a lot easier for your customer because, you know, if you tell your customer, you can buy my product, and by the way, you have to buy SQL Server, and now they've got to buy an expensive SQL Server license, that can be a challenge of sales. So Raven can help in those scenarios. Also, the other thing I just mentioned, I wasn't involved in it directly, but one of the largest RavenDB installations that I know of actually powers pluralsight.com. So if you've ever used Pluralsight for training videos, highly recommend you do. Their entire course catalog is backed by RavenDB, and they've been very public about that. It's been working well for them.
So speaking to the OEM, I don't have a gigantic success story, but I actually did run my own sort of project where I had written software for a very niche market. One of my neighbors runs cheerleading competitions. These things exist. I had no idea, but he needed a scoring system, so I wrote the scoring system with RavenDB. It's extremely stressful doing it just because, like, the scores have to be computed now, right? The way it works, like, people were writing the scores down on paper. They would hand them in to a judge's or to a sort of entering table where people would sit there and enter all the scores in the system. They would all enter it, calculate the winners, you know, give rankings, and they had all these crazy ranking systems. So I ran that for 2 years or so, and it worked pretty well, and, you know, never had a problem on site, because if the system goes down during the competition, it's a gigantic fail. So that was all actually offline, because I couldn't risk needing to connect to the web. So I had the OEM license for a local instance. I actually ran it as a Windows service, and then I had an MVC app that connected to it locally on the laptop, and I had sort of a custom replication scheme to get stuff from the server to the client to run the competition. So not huge, but you know, it worked for me. Then at client sites, one recent client, like I was actually brought there to do RavenDB, but it turned out there was a lot of other things that had more priority once I got there. So I only got to spend like 2 or 3 days actually working with Raven, but in that time, one of the things I implemented was a ticket search for the support function. Before that, they had a web forms app that was using like JavaScript. Do you remember when you had to do JavaScript where you had to like put the script in the little thing to say, put this on the page? Yeah, I'm already forgetting again what that was, but it was frightening. So the way it worked was it only loaded like 250 rows from SQL Server, and then they could kind of search on the client through that, which, yeah, wasn't that great. And then apparently there was a Google search appliance that from this other box that was supposed to go to this Google search appliance, but everybody had forgotten like even where the box was, and it wasn't working, but nobody knew like what to do about it. So there was like 2 million records around tickets, but just sort of taking those and like turning them into ticket documents, it turned out there was only like 80,000 actual tickets from the whole life of the company. You know, I set up this process to sort of asynchronously sort of sync the ticket system, the SQL Server system with a Raven system to do searches. And I was a little scared about what it was going to take. It was like 2 minutes to import all of it, and then after that, it was just doing deltas. It would happen instantaneously, and immediately the support staff was able to do searches across the tickets, find tickets on various criteria, because it was doing kind of a full text search like was shown earlier with the content tab. So I was able to search across multiple fields all at once, return relevant results, you know, in sort of the Lucene score order, and like provide value like immediately to the support staff.
We are, as a company, we're currently supporting the largest software as a service provider for accounting services in Italy. And they are currently migrating the whole infrastructure from SQL Server to partially to RavenDB, because basically all the business intelligence processes will remain on SQL Server, because they have tools that are built for SQL Server, such as reporting services and stuff like that. But they discovered that the tax declarations in Italy are pretty complex, and they tend to change.
Only in Italy, never, nowhere else, just Italy.
But the fact is that every time I travel, I need to explain to people that are not Italians that in Italy you must have an accountant to do tax declarations for you, because it's impossible for a normal person to do a tax declaration. It's impossible. It's totally impossible. So you have accountants, and they discovered that moving away from SQL servers, for example, for tax declaration, they discovered that they can search tax declarations. That is a thing that can never be done on this structure. This document is so huge that on SQL Server, in order to load one single document, you have to issue a query with something like 34 joins to reaggregate stuff together. So the legacy application was built not to satisfy the user requirements, but to satisfy the technology constraint. And moving away from that constraints dramatically simplified the whole technology stack, and they were able to provide to the end users features that the end users have never seen before, like searching, for example, a single text box that searches everywhere in the tax declaration. And they have deployed this application to production 1 year ago, and they have migrated currently the last 3 years of all their customer declarations. And they are currently building all the other applications. And they've already built the internal ticketing system to support the internal teams based on the RavenDB.
Two other products that I think have pretty interesting uses of RavenDB. A lot of us use NServiceBus, and as of, was it 3.5, 3.0, somewhere on there? They decided to take a different route in their internal configuration. By default, they use RavenDB to hold things like everything. So all internal messages that they need to do timeouts and deferring and publishing of, who are my subscribers, all that stuff, they're able to deploy to a client site and just have RavenDB deployed as a server running. And it really got rid of a lot of their configuration questions with SQL Server, which is a nightmare. So from a product perspective, I think it's a really streamlined way of doing things, just including RavenDB as part of your tool. Octopus Deploy also does that. I don't have any relation to Octopus Deploy. I didn't do anything there, but they do both internally use RavenDB, and then also their product when you install Octopus Deploy, it's installing Raven, and it helps out with that too, because you get a lot of versioning, get all that stuff out of the box, and don't have to deal with SQL Server.
Just quickly, for business analytics or something like that, where have you found to be the edge cases for Raven where you said, oh, okay, well, we're really at a point now where we shouldn't use Raven for this. It should be something else. Is it a business analytics system? Is it what?
The issue we faced with this accounting system is that from the business intelligence point of view, the user wants to define the query at runtime, and this requires an index. And if you have a huge amount of data, the user get back inconsistent result, because you need to wait for the index to be ready. And if the user wants to use some tools like a reporting service, designing on the surface the query and the reporting model, it's something that cannot be done with a document database in general, I think, because there is no tool that helps you to prevent the eventual consistency problem in this case. So if you need to go to business intelligence, to reporting features where the report shape is defined by the end user at runtime, it's really hard to do that with.
Yeah, business analytics is a really, really broad thing. But when you're talking about dimensional data and you're talking about running ad hoc reporting, that's kind of where I draw the line and say, hey, we maybe need to look at another tool. I like to use Raven as my operational, OLTP database, and use that information to source those things along with I use messaging, so along with messaging, use those two things to bring into dimensional database if you want to, or whatever cloud analytics thing you want to use.
You ready? One thing I was going to add on to that, like at my current client, I'm not using RavenDB there, but one of the things I'm doing is getting data into Tableau to do BI, analysis on what's going on. The data actually already is in MySQL, and even there, it still has to be massaged just to get it ready to do BI. So like there's other views of the data just for Tableau. So even in that case, like it's just, you can't just like point this tool at it and let it do its thing. Like you have to kind of prepare it.
With some limitation, those part of analytics is KPIs, right? And I think that's something that Raven does fairly well. And if you have that denormalized thing that says, hey, this is the count of something, or here's the status red, green, and have that as just a load, that's a really good thing to put in Raven.
So I guess what I'll add, I agree with everything that's been said. So one of the main things I used Raven for was at a company that does time and attendance systems, employee clock in, clock out, and feeding payroll and things like that. So there's a lot of business reporting analytics that need to happen out of a system like that. And one of the strengths of Raven is that for things that we know we need to deliver to our customers as part of the base product, those are easily delivered with Raven by having predefined static MapReduce indexes. Raven's really good at that and actually can perform better than SQL Server. Some of our SQL-based solutions had a really hard time with that because As SQL's doing aggregations, and I'm picking on SQL Server here, or this is any RDBMS. As you're doing aggregations in an RDBMS, you're doing those at time of query, and often you're creating locks as you're doing that because the results need to be consistent. So if you're just reporting out of an RDBMS, your primary OLTP, you're creating side effects of slowing down the read performance on your OLTP. That can even be a worse scenario if your end user has direct access to the SQL database. That happened with one of our key products. Is it was all SQL based, and people said, well, I've got a connection string to my SQL server, I can start running queries. And they didn't realize that just by running queries, they're slowing down the live production site because they're creating locks in ways that the developers of that app didn't realize. The nice thing about Raven is we're kind of guarded from that, but also we can deliver to the customer the solution of SQL replication. We can say, you know what, these are all the things our product does, and for the things it doesn't do, we will push to a SQL server where you can go to your heart's content and run the queries from there. And that kind of gives you the best of both worlds.
We have time for 2 more questions.
What are the most common business reasons for doing sharding? And also, I'm sure there's technical reasons like database size and so forth. And what are the most common, if there is such a thing, schemes for doing sharding?
One that I've heard about, I haven't had to actually face it, but it came up because the company I was working for had some European offices, was the idea of sovereignty and having your EU data not ever leave the EU, and being separate from the US data.
Generally, this is the same reason we move to sharding, is the stick the data as much as possible near to the user that most require that type of data. So basically a geographic shard based on the fact that we can assume, for example, that orders created in Italy will be read in Italy and will be used in Italy, and so we can put them in the Italian shard, and orders created in Germany can be put in the German shard. The benefit in this case is that that sharding gives us, if we have any German employee working from Italy that is using his own orders created in German, the client API hides the fact that it is completely transparent. The application will be simply slower because it's pulling data off from the German servers. What it tends to do is to replicate sharded servers in a master-slave scenario across different sites, not only for having a redundancy of data, but also because the application, since the application knows that it is living, the application is living in a sharded environment, you can start saying, okay, since I'm living in a sharded environment, if I need some data that from my point of view are immutable, are read-only, why go to the shard on the other side? Just read them from the local replicated server. That is a read-only one. So I was explaining to someone that we had an edge case that we use shard because we have a customer where the offices, the accounting offices are on one side of the road, and the manufacturing are on the other side of the road, and the only connection between the two sides of the same company is a Wi-Fi connection that is pretty crappy, because in Italy you cannot pass an Ethernet cable under the public roads. And so the only option is a Wi-Fi connection, and each time a huge truck passes on the road, the Wi-Fi gets down. So the only option was to, okay, but why do we need to query, for example, invoices or orders from the manufacturing point of view? Never. We just need a read-only view of that. On the manufacturing side, we just need to have some information that we have we have not denormalized before, so we can stay with shard and cross-replicate data on the other side, and it's just this gives you all the power we can have. And then messaging allows you to have bi-directional communication without losing anything, because as soon as the connection is up, the queues gives you the fact that the message flows on the other side and back.
That's actually something that I'm very interested in. We implement sharding because that was expected. A lot of the design of sharding came from the idea of inhibernate shards, and that came from Google, so I assume they know what they're doing. I actually spent a lot of time thinking about how to do sharding in an easier fashion. I think the sharding API actually does it quite well, but we don't have a lot of issues around that. We don't hear people, oh, I have problem X or Y. Something interesting I saw on Twitter, I think, Matt, you tweeted that Mao did an intro to RavenDB talk. He included sharding in it because it was that easy. So my question is, are people not using sharding, or are people just not having any problems using sharding?
I can speak from experience at 3M. Your question was, what are some business reasons for doing sharding? And one is it's just cheaper to scale out than up. At 3M, like I said, we had this machine called the Beast, and that was what hundreds of thousands of dollars. And because there was such a huge SQL database and it was too painful to do sharding with SQL, I think with Raven it makes it a lot easier. It's easier to buy 10 cheaper machines and shard out to those instead of this one uber god machine that can do everything, right? So I think that's one reason. I will say that people are hesitant to do it because it has been so difficult in the past with SQL. It's like, I know the team at 3M, they're like, well, oh my God, it's such a mess with SQL, we're just not gonna go down that route. So they didn't even pursue sharding even though it was a real option. So I think one is just perception. I think if we make it known a bit more that, hey, we can do sharding really easily, split the data across multiple machines easy, I think it'll pick up a bit.
So going to that, one of the reasons why it's cheap is because you can actually put a lot less documents per server. And then that way you don't have to pay for these really big servers with a massive amounts of CPU so that you can index millions upon millions of documents, right? You can actually shard and say, hey, and use it in conjunction with replication. You don't have to replicate everywhere. If you have 100 shards, 100 servers, you can say, you know, this one server that has this shard is going to replicate to 3 more just so I have a backup. And using those two in conjunction really helps you scale out more cheaply. I will say that some of the stumbling blocks that people do hit when they use sharding is that Raven, we assume that you have a set number of shards and that your shards are well defined, and so which is different than other sharding strategies where, you know, say you're doing it for multi-tenancy and you want to just have a shard per tenant, then that's essentially, you know, 1 to n shards. And we actually had a client that that hit that issue. That, you know, it's doable. It's just not probably ideal for that scenario. It's better if you have very set definitions on what your shards are going to be instead of having them kind of be dynamic.
Just with regard to that, dynamic shards are actually possible. You need to, I think that you need to play with the sharding strategy to provide, oh, there is a shard that you've never seen before, here is its configuration, but that's about it.
So it's definitely possible, but that's probably one of the roadblocks that people do hit, is that it's not a default thing, it's just something that you have to think about.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to that is that, you know, there's not a mechanism to auto-balance your shards. You know, like in a system like Mongo, you've got kind of the management and configuration servers that are going to take care of any balancing things for you. But of course, that makes the overall setup vastly more complex than, you know, what is it, the 5 lines of code that you need at a minimum to get up and running in Raven. So the other thing I would echo is Mauro's comments in his presentation about, you know, while it's easy to get up and running, you know, in a demo case or the blind sharding, really thinking through what that means to your business as far as like what's going to happen in a year, what's going to happen in 2 years as we grow this product, as we add tenants, whatever that might be. That process of identifying those requirements and coming up with your strategy there, that can still be time-consuming, expensive. You know, there's a lot of unknowns there. You have to consult the business, that type of thing. So you wouldn't want to make that decision lightly and just go to production with blind sharding across 2 servers and, you know, not think about it beyond that. So I don't know if that's a reason why people aren't using it, or if that's, I think it's just, it has its place, and that place isn't everywhere. You know?
And this is the last question. Make it good.
So you guys doing NServiceBus implementations. Have you moved to doing, for high availability on Raven, have you moved to using replication instead of Windows clustering? How do you do the high availability on your distributor clusters for NServiceBus? Yeah.
Normally, it's on. Normally, I don't do a lot of high availability stuff for the actual workers. I'm really big on relying on like VMware infrastructure for that sort of stuff. So I find it's a lot easier, and this is what my DevOps guys tell me too, to have that kind of reliability more at the infrastructure level, so that if that VM does fail, it goes over to the other host rather than trying to back up a server and then point all your NServiceBus endpoints to a different server or anything like that. But maybe other people have done something different. I don't know.
I mean, at your queuing infrastructure level, you kind of have durable queues so that you don't have to deal with high availability all the time, but you do run into issues, specifically within NServiceBus, where you can have saga contention. If your Raven instance goes down, then it's going to replicate over. It could be eventually consistent, and if you need a high level of availability there, then that's an issue. So I tend to run non-highly available for my queuing infrastructure for that reason. The queue the messages are still going to be there in the queue, and you're really just managing SLAs. So I like to deal using health monitoring to figure that out. And NServiceBus has a lot around SLAs and not meeting those SLAs now with the new tooling, lots of new stuff. So I would lean more towards that than trying to make NServiceBus highly available, because it's queuing, right? It's going to be there when you come back up. Because same thing.
Not strictly about NServiceBus, but I can tell you from experience, a lot of that depends on the ops team that you're dealing with. And RavenDB supports clustering, Windows clustering. I don't have no idea why you want to run with that, honestly. Yeah, I know, but people run it. People go and buy the enterprise license specifically because that allows them to run with Windows clusters. When you have a Windows cluster and it falls down, there is a downtime of, what, 1-2 minutes? Something like that. And then it switches over, and then you have a database that needs to start up, had to recover from the failed transaction from before. You have to have a shared storage. You have to have much more expensive licenses all around, Windows, Raven, all of that sort of stuff. And all of that for an experience that, you know, running a highly available RavenDB replication cluster, server goes down, other server pick it up and run with that. I think that that's a much better alternative, but, you know, the DevOps eventually say something like that, and people go with Windows clustering for that reason. One thing that I wanted to mention with regard to replication and distribution of data, what I've seen about Raven is that replication is happening in an async fashion. That means that I'm writing to Judah, Judah commits, he tells me that he committed, and then he goes and starts distributing to other guys. If the Judah machine gets shut down, he has no chance to send that to other people. And from my perspective, that transaction has been committed. From a cluster perspective, it hasn't been. RavenDB has a feature called write assurance, where you can commit a transaction and then you can ask, okay, I want to wait until that transaction has been replicated to at least 2 other servers, at least 3 other servers, depending on how vital that information is. And that should help you deal with those sort of issues.
So the write assurance, I authored an event store, a Raven implementation of an event store, and I've actually had a client do just that for the event store portion. And not necessarily for the distributor, but using write assurance on top of your Saga persister and your subscription storage would definitely be a way to make you highly available using replication rather than using clustering. Yeah. And for your distributor, I mean, 2 minutes, I didn't know it was that high. But, I mean, you can set up, if you're in Amazon, you could set up, CloudWatch metrics to shut down that instance and start up another instance in probably less than that time. So. Say what? No. You use an AMI. You already have that instance running, right? It doesn't have to be a full, and then you just swap drives, and you'll be fine.
I use when it comes to NServiceBus, we simply forget about subscriptions high availability, and we say that, well, we don't really care when a subscription to a specific event comes in, because if it arrives later, it's from the user point of view, it's just been subscribed later, so we can live with that. The problem is with the Saga data, because you have a single point of failure, basically. So you have that data that drives the Saga that needs to be stored somewhere, and we tweak the Saga persister to use write assurance in order to be sure that all this. When we commit a Saga, the Saga data are replicated to the old server in the replica in order to be sure that there can be any concurrency problem related to the fact that one message has been handled by another process that it was reading the Saga data from an outdated server, and in order to avoid that problem.
Any last burning questions someone has? Yeah. So does anyone have experience using RavenDB in the public or federal sector? So I guess the answer is no. I can tell you that there have been several states that have purchased licenses. I can tell you that there are some Department of X that have purchased something. I don't know if I can tell you which. So wait, we have answer?
So my company, the network's been on RavenDB for, I guess, quite some time now. And we have a few hundred tenants on RavenDB, a couple big names, and some of them are, I can't name names, but some government agencies as tenants, so.
We have some on RavenHQ. I don't want to name names either, but we do have.
Okay, so the answer is yes, but we won't tell you. More to the point, guys, this is the end of our first day. Tomorrow, we're going to start with me trying to embarrass myself in public again. We're going to end today. We're going to have a hackathon at 6:37 at the hotel. If you don't stay at the Hotel Garden Inn, the address is on the website under venue. And we're going to be there and try to do some cool stuff. See you tomorrow. Thank you, guys.